Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. My name is Sarah.
And I'm Solo. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it has been.
You gonna tell the good people what happened?
My parents came to town right at the same time. Our camera took a swim in the pool and it just seemed like a good time to take a week off. And then the baby at the very end came down with the ear infection too. So even took a little more time than a week. So it's been a nice break though. I try to always take advantage of breaks to rest and refresh.
But you did not rest or get refreshed. That's the problem. There is never a break for mothers.
No, that's true.
And fathers, and fathers too. You know, it's like, oh yeah, this is gonna be nice to have time off.
Yes.
But it just was one of those weeks.
Well, and then what happened in the week is the temperature in our country has gone
so high,
skyrocket.
Man.
And I had already decided to get myself off of Instagram, so I didn't even know all the crazy that was happening. I had just decided to take a little time off of Instagram. And yeah, Solo filled me in a little. So it's been nuts, it's been crazy, and a lot of good is happening. And
I hope.
Yeah, and we decided we would just come back with a video talking about our thoughts on this topic. And we
what topic?
The topic of racism in America.
Okay, great.
So it all started, most of you probably know, even around the world, that it started with the death of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer, at the knee of a police officer. Horrifying video, and it was disgusting to watch.
Man, that was horrible. I remember that day when that happened. It's kind of one of those days where, well, I had shut down all my social media and news because I just had a lot going on that day, and I just never read or watched anything until it was around 11 at night. I decided to lay down in bed, pick up my phone, catch up on social media, catch up on the media. And I watched that video once and I have not watched it again. That was so horrible. I mean, I couldn't sleep for a couple hours just thinking about it. It was just very sickening. I can't even imagine what the family, you know, we don't even know this guy, and we were moved with that much compassion for his life. I can't even imagine what it's like for his family and his friends, people that actually know him as a man. It was hard to see. Now that's triggered a lot of conversations, talk, and all that about racism in the country and the history of the racism. I think it's so important to not only talk about where we are, but putting everything into proper context. I think that the country can move forward in a positive way if we are all clear on what it is that we hope to achieve. You know, when we have practical steps that people can take or move, then that's what real change happens.
We are a couple that have been married. We are Kenyan and longtime American. I have all kinds of roots, background. And we've been married for
18 years.
Almost.
Oh no, almost 18 years. My goodness.
Not quite.
No, 18 years this summer, so 17.
Yeah, so we thought we would just throw in our 2 cents on the topic and what is going on and what we see from our perspective. What do you think about racism in America? Have you experienced a lot of racism in America, or your experience here? Because he actually moved here right when we got married. So you've been here just about 18 years now.
Here's where I think it's so important for people to listen to each other, is because we cannot look at life or even this issue just based on one's experience, because that is one person's experience is not enough. You have to contextualize everything in the scope of everybody else's experience. So I personally have I wouldn't say I've experienced it much. At the same time, I think from just my own personal way of doing things, I'm an internal optimist, and I like to be happy, to stay happy inside, you know, from the inside out. And so I don't go around looking for it, because I know if I do, I'll find it a lot more probably than I realize. But I do that for my own good, because when I've always just had this philosophy of what's happening around you, you can't always affect it, but you can decide what happens inside of you. So if I have someone that treats me wrong, or if someone looks at me and they judge me for whatever definition they want to put me, or whatever box they want to put me in, the validation and my identity of who I am really comes from God. And so if I can define that within myself, it takes really a lot to make me upset. So I could have a blatant racist in front of my face, and they could say all sorts of things. Well, if it makes them feel good about themselves, it doesn't change who I am and how I feel about myself one way or the other. And so that's just a mentality that I have internally. Now, that's personal. But overall, I guess there's a bigger picture, and that's what we are talking about here as a country. I could go through my experiences, and I can identify specific times and say, there could have been racism involved here, you know.
I remember when we first got married, and this has happened actually throughout our marriage, every once in a while still, when we go out to a restaurant, the waiter will bring the bill to me.
I think that happened a lot more when we were younger.
It happened more when we were younger, but that did not make you happy.
No, it did not. It did not. It was really upsetting. And then you know what?
And I didn't even notice at first. I'm like, why is he giving the bill to me? It made zero sense to me at the moment.
The white girl, she'll have the money. The little black guy,
and by the way, that happened in Kenya.
That happened in Kenya too
more
sometimes.
Than anywhere.
But it happened a lot more when we were younger. So I've watched this thing. Although this year, was it this year?
But he takes it upon himself to educate people in that moment.
Yeah.
He's like, hello, sir, I'm taking the bill.
Yeah. And so you can see people's reasoning and thinking there. But it happened, Sarah, when we were gone, and you didn't notice it as much as I did. When we were down in Kansas City, I don't know, it was last summer, right? It was last summer. And we went to that, whatever district they call, where you could, near the ballpark and
all
stuff.
The shops, yep.
And we were going to all these fancy restaurants and fancy shops, and every single time we went out to eat, they will ask, well, are you together? Like, is your bill together? Now,
that's right.
I've seen that happen, like when you have a group of people.
Yeah.
But as a couple, I think I've been just about we've been to many places in this country, but I just noticed it more in Kansas City. It happened
But
once.
I thought it was because we went at lunchtime, and it's like,
no, it was not.
Maybe we're business partners, they think.
No, we went to a fancy, see, she doesn't remember that. Went to a fancy restaurant because we paid a lot of money.
That's when he convinced me, okay.
At first I said it. She didn't quite thought,
I was like, it's lunch hour.
Yeah.
They just think we're here.
And then we were there late at night. It's like, no, you don't go with your coworker to that restaurant on an evening, you know. And so,
and just to put it in perspective, if you're from another part of the world and maybe this isn't your culture, like here, my parents, a waiter would never, if my parents were out together, they're both white, a waiter would never bring the bill to my mom.
Right.
Or if they walked in together, probably would never ask them, are you together? Or
exactly. It's separate, yeah. So that was one. But it also shows how different places, because that's never really happened to us in Lincoln, as I can remember. But we went out with another couple one time. Remember we went out with Candice and Adam?
Oh yeah.
And he's white and she's black. And they grew up in Kansas City. And they were telling us this. I remember that conversation.
Oh, they said the same thing.
And so we were talking and they said the same thing. And we said, oh man, we haven't seen much of it here. But they was like, no, we feel. Now after we went to their hometown, we felt the same vibe.
Yeah.
And so that's just one example.
Different areas are different. We live in I would say, an upper middle class neighborhood, and we have Indian neighbors, Vietnamese neighbors, we have several African American neighbors, and African American husband and wife, and mixed race marriages. Yeah. And so we live in we don't see a lot of racism even around us in our city, but it's not subtle.
It probably would be subtle.
Yeah.
So then I could go through some different lists. I remember when I first moved to Lincoln, I was working for a bank, and I'd have like a disgruntled customer say, well, I want to talk to the manager, and I could see them come to, they're brought to my office, and I could see that they are shocked. Because they weren't expecting to see me there. And I was a young kid from Kenya with an accent. And so, you know, you can see a lot of things like that. And I think some of those, we'll always have.
Yeah.
We'll always have until the end of the world. And I'm not saying that things cannot change for the better. There's a lot to do with education. Exposure is a huge thing. Yes. Ignorance is a big thing. And so as a person, I've just learned to with everything in life, and I think it just makes you for a better piece of life for your own self, is that they've got a problem.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make their problem, whether it's ignorance, misinformation, prejudice, racism, just flat out racism. No matter what their problem is, I'm just not about to make it mine. And I'm not going to lose my cool or my happiness for some sorry person who needs to really find God and really understand that all humans are made in the image of God, you know. So
there is definitely subtle racism. We experienced it just a few weeks ago in a store, and or a few months ago, I guess, in a store, he did. And it happens. We definitely notice a lot more stares and like not friendly stares when we go to bigger cities where people live more segregated too than we happen to here. But I know people who live here who have horrific stories of racism too. So it happens. That have had bad stories. You experienced it once when you took some girls out to a store, and you had it was like you were going on a date on this cookie shop that you never went back to. You're taking the girls out to a cookie shop, and you felt that they treated you really badly. And I think it was a subtle way. Oh, I would never say that was racism. They were the horriblest management ever. Right, but I'm telling you, a black person would be able to smell that and say, "Hey, so you're going through it." So then this is where perspective comes. Yeah, it's true. You know, because she was brought up differently. I wasn't even brought up here, where there was racism. Although I moved when I was pretty young. But at the same time, there was tribalism in Kenya. So I see the similarities there. And so I understand the just general prejudice. But she said that the story to me, I don't even think I told you that, but I thought that. Yeah. So you took your little brown kids to a store. They were the worst. Yeah. They were the worst customer service ever. Like, just almost ignored me. Yep, exactly. And I was the only one in the store. Exactly. Yeah, but I think I've you would have had this bad customer service. I've encountered that without my children, so I would. That is true. And that's the thing. And that's the thing is that's why we need to be really understanding with everybody, because not every person that sometimes bad people are just bad people in general too. Bad customer service. It is. Yeah, sometimes bad neighbors are bad neighbors. Like bad cops are bad cops. Yeah, I mean, so sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's more. But there is definitely real racism in America. When you look at historical context, it's actually a problem that will never go away completely. Here's what I think. I think when I've watched what's been going on in the media and just in society in general, I think very positive things can come out of this. Yes. But I also think if we are not careful, bad things can happen out of this as well. Yes, a lot of division. So we can have unintended consequence because sometimes we're not patient with people. Someone might say something the wrong way and they don't mean at all that it's wrong, but they get jumped on and be told, you know, it's like, so then I know as a white person, it's difficult to speak into the situation because I feel like to some ears, you cannot say anything right. Absolutely. So you say Black Lives Matter, they say you can't speak to that. You say all lives matter, they say no, Black Lives Matter. That's wrong. Right. And I read somewhere we should be saying people of color or POC. Literally a couple days later, I read, if you say people of color or POC, you should think hard about who you're referring to. And if you're referring to blacks, then you should say blacks with a capital B. And I'm like, wow. Oh my word, this is overwhelming. I like, how do you know even what to say? Because who's making the rules? The rules are coming out real fast and it's so hard to keep up with them. Right. And if you don't talk enough, you don't stand for us. But if you talk too much, you shouldn't be talking because you don't know what you're talking about. I think that's where it makes it difficult in terms of if our real desire as a society is to really see change that happens in people, because change has to happen from the inside out. Yeah. And you know, sometimes we focus so much on the behavior and not deal with the issue of the heart, because racism at its core, and I teach this, and for me as a pastor, I think it's more of a theological problem than it is a legislation problem, because legislatively, we could actually make the right laws. 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was made, but man, the next 100 years were horrible. Yeah. In some ways, even worse than slavery, because people are supposed to be free, but they're not really free because it was just institutionalized racism now. And you know, you can't even think of it. Civil rights movements helped a lot of
thinking and a lot of conversation, and there's been a lot of progress that has happened in America since the civil rights movement happened. But yet we still are dealing with issues like the George Floyd situation in 2020.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's very frustrating for people. It's like, man, we should be way beyond this by now.
Sure.
Part of it is because the real hard issue hasn't changed. We might have had intellectual issues that have been solved, understanding, and so we can coexist and live respectfully with each other, or to some degree. But if people's hearts are not changed and their eyes are not open, then we're going to be just dealing with this ugly animal over time.
That's true.
We can do things well until there's pressure.
Yeah.
People can go get along over until they are pushed to pressure, and then something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so if our goal really is to see that there's a real change that happens, I think we need to be more patient with each other and not be quick to judge.
I think we all come from such different backgrounds, and understanding and hearing each other helps tremendously. I grew up with my parents. I don't feel like they were racist at all. We had a lot of friends of all different races. We, as pastors, my dad had leaders on his team that were black.
Not just church members, because sometimes you can have churches where members are mixed, but you never see diversity in leadership at all.
He always had leadership that were diverse, diversity of leadership. And so I grew up this way. When I told him who I wanted to marry, he didn't blink an eye.
About race was not the issue. It was just everything else.
In fact, I liked a guy before that, and he said absolutely not. And it made me think, would he have a problem with that? But when I brought to him solo, it was only looking at character. My parents, they were only looking at character and what the Lord was telling them. Yeah. And so I didn't grow up in a racist home, and I grew up in the Midwest. We moved around a little, but it was Midwest everywhere. And so I think it was harder for me to see it because I also my experience was not living in a home with racists. And so it was harder for me to see it actually for a little while. And so that's why he would point it out to me, no, that isn't right. And I would think, boy, they're confused here when they're giving me the bill instead of him. But that's when it's not in the heart, that's when that subtle stuff comes out too.
And so I think especially, I speak for Christians here. You guys, the Lord's really taught us a lot of things, and so we can be patient. Even if someone is wrong, it could just be because of exposure or just ignorance. But we can't lose people's hearts. How can we educate it? I cannot force education on you, and I cannot force you to love me. But if I'm patient with you and understanding, you listen to me, I listen to you, we can grow and learn from each other's experiences. So Sarah, I was involved back, I think it was the Ferguson situation. And there was a group of community leaders and pastors in our town, and we were talking, it's like, man, how do we fight these as leaders in our community to make sure that our city, that we can look at injustice, we can look at racism, and we even made statements in the newspaper and signed declarative statements. But we spent many hours praying and talking, and we had several meetings about the same topic. But I remember in the conversation, and you had a diverse group of leaders. By diverse, I mean like a diverse in terms of a racial diverse group of leaders. But what I noticed in the conversation that was playing out was the black leaders were very free to say exactly what they felt. But I'm just watching the conversation. We're in a big round table, and I see half of the white leaders were choosing their words carefully. Well, because one guy had said something that was very ignorant and was shut down so quick, but he didn't have a bad heart. And so I contributed and said, hey, what I'm noticing in the observation is this, is that we have spiritual leaders and civic leaders sitting here we are all on the same page, otherwise we wouldn't be on this table together, but we're not letting people even complete their thought because the Caucasian cannot, because the Caucasian was the oppressor when it comes to racism in America.
Right.
But most of the guys now, they just inherited experiences. They did not participate or practice the kind of racism that we want to deal with here. And there was a level of conversation that was limited that can shed some understanding, which would help us as a community move forward in a more real lasting change. I think we need to allow people to talk. whether you don't agree or disagree, and just hear where they're coming from, because you can never really address the issues of the heart unless you hear the person's heart truthfully, not the one that's kind of minced and battered up to make you be pleased by what they're saying.
Yes. Let's talk about a way forward. I think that the only way forward is for us to see each other as individuals created uniquely. Like, our different colors are special. Actually, our differences are amazing. It's awesome. A lot of people will look at him and say, oh, he's an African American, he's a Black American, and he's in a group, a lump group.
Let me just tell you my hyphenate Americanism.
Hyphenate?
Hyphenated Americanism.
Sounds like decaffeinated.
My proper hyphenation.
Oh, hyphenated.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, let me tell you my correct hyphenation. I'm an African American.
African American.
Oh, is it a Kenyan African American?
I remember when Solo moved here, I would have to translate for him when we would talk to someone with a strong Southern accent, or an African American with a strong Southern accent, and they would assume that he could understand them in the slang words that they were saying, and he had no idea, and I would translate and tell him what they were saying. You remember, though, I could just keep going, because people would like wave at you, though. It's like you were part of them. Remember?
Yeah, but I got that part. Because when I moved to Lincoln, it was 92% Caucasian.
Yeah.
Right now we're at 88%, so it's become a little bit more diverse.
Yeah.
Maybe more 80. It's more 80.
Hey, listen, I lived in India for a while, and people would, when I would see a white person, which I saw a white person, I think 3 times in 6 months, we waved at each other.
Yeah, so every time you're at a grocery store, at a bank, whatever, if you see a brother or a sister, this kind of know what you do. And so she was like, man, you know them? Like, no, it's a brotherhood thing.
No, but I got it.
Yeah. But there were, and even before I came, it was even a smaller group. They all knew each other.
In 18 years it's changed.
Yeah, and it's changed dramatically since I've been here.
Yeah, but I think the way forward is to know people as people. Like, people are created, we're all children of God, created in the image of God. So if we see people as people, we see them differently. Our colors make us special. It makes us unique. It's awesome. I love that. I think it's a gift that we have diversity. Taking time to get to know other people that are different than you is the very best. And I'm talking about all kinds of people that are different than you. Open up your home, have them over, sit down with them over a coffee table, have coffee with them, meet them. Listening to people, hearing them, really hearing them will help us make great strides.
The other thing that I find, listening, and I agree with what Sarah's saying, is listening, and truly listening. Because sometimes we talk at each other and we don't really listen to each other. And one of the things, maybe some people like it, to me, I find it to be very distasteful when my friends, my Caucasian friends, that I wanted to be the champion warriors of all Black people, sometimes I found that sometimes it's not very sincere. It's like they're very overly aggressive, as if I need a white person to take care of me.
Oh, yeah.
As the biggest defender of my life. Like, I can't really take care of myself.
What do you want to hear from people?
I think people need to be genuine. And I think the thing that makes people being genuine is when people don't get shot down when they actually say something, even if it's wrong. It's just be heard and be says, what you said wasn't right.
What if a white person says something to you and it's like, they're off. They're off.
Right. Let them finish it out, because you can truly address someone's issue when you really hear them out.
Yeah.
But if you shut them down, there's something contained in that heart that you will never hear, because they'll never want to cross you again. Don't want to be chewed out again for saying the wrong thing. So they're gonna hold back. Yeah. And so no real solution. So you get surface answer, or even pretense sometimes, in terms of, and they say the right things, but if their hearts are not really changed, and their hearts will only be changed if you could truly hear what's really in their hearts.
And then address that.
And then address that. Yeah. And that happens with patience. When I moved here from Kenya, I just learned how many people, in fact, I didn't even get defensive I was a defender of all Africans. Every time the subject of Africa would come, there'll be, very educated, very smart people would have the dumbest, the dumbest perception of what Africa is like. And you just want to punch the TV and say, people, really? And so and at the time I would get really frustrated and realize how, because it was always very negative and very wrong. Over time I started realizing all their perspective is what they see on the media, the little history that you learn in school and all that. And so Africa always gets generalized in America as a country. I mean, it's the second biggest landmass in the planet, on planet Earth. If you look at a lot of the maps, like this map right here, it's a distorted size. In proportion to the continents, that's not even the size, but that's what's created in people's perspective. But I later started realizing I just need to be patient, because people will not learn when I shoot them down all the time. Yeah. But as I started realizing, you can drop some words of exposure to people,
educate them
when the opportunity is right, when they want to hear you, when they have a real interest in it. When they don't, it's just a matter of getting upset with people and that are ignorant. It's just been fed to them their whole life.
That happened when we traveled to Kenya. There were a lot of comments like, oh, I didn't know Kenya was like that. And they were genuinely curious and wanting to learn. And then there were some people that would come back and be like, how dare you not know that about this? And how dare you think Africa is a country and blah, blah, blah. And they actually would... It keeps them from
there's any development in Africa. You think it's all beat up and wars and
it
famine.
Keeps the people that are learning from expressing that they were grateful to learn that.
Yeah.
And it just put them on the defensive and have to like.
And I could totally understand. I could totally understand the frustration on the other side, because I remember feeling that way, and then I realized I'm not changing anything. Yeah. But it helped me at least to say, okay, they are coming at it.
Yeah.
I found a lot of African Americans even that their perspective of Africa is so distorted, because African American history, in history book, anything I've opened and learned from American history, it just goes back to the colonial times.
Yeah.
And when the transatlantic slavery started, that's the point of where the African American history is taught in schools and colleges. And so, well, Africans were there well before the transatlantic slavery. And they were, and many of those history prior to that, you don't really get even on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
You need to know where to find the sources and to understand the real history of Africa. It's either 10 billion years ago and 400 years ago. It's like the gap between 10 billion and, it's never really, the in-between, most of the world don't even know.
It's definitely not taught in our schools. I had a public school education and it wasn't taught. So.
Oh, it's not taught in colleges. It's not even on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway,
seeking to learn from others and learn from their experiences. Like we said earlier, everybody has different experiences they're coming from, and to learn what people have gone through. We have sat with many African Americans who told us, who have been in Lincoln for a long time and could tell us stories that is like, wow, I don't even know how I would face the adversity they've gone through. And I love listening to their stories because A, I see that we have made some progress and I'm thankful for it. And B, I get a perspective of where they're coming from when they're fighting for what they're fighting for, because they have experienced stuff that I didn't even know was happening.
And they can smell it from a distance because of their experience, the experience of people that they really truly love. One of our friends, like Sister Bernice, she's the first black person to actually have her kids at the south side of Lincoln.
Yeah.
She fought the school system on that. She was like a freedom fighter. All the black kids went to school on the north side of town. Were never allowed to come in. And so we know people in real life that have actually been pioneers. And so when I say that I haven't felt overtly strong racism that's direct in Lincoln, but that's because of people like Sister Bernice and the many others that actually have been able to change people's perspectives because of the way they live their life.
Yes, this is a long conversation, but I think it's an important one. And I want to ask you, are you afraid of the police?
Okay, so that's another thing. And I've seen...
And what are you teaching your children in regards to that, your young boys?
So I'm gonna just talk of personal experience, not to put anybody else's experience below. I have never in my life, ever, and I've been stopped by police several times, I have never felt like fearful. Now, I have had bad cops,
Yep.
and I have had reasonable cops.
And we definitely had a situation where we know
I knew it was racism,
cop.
but I never, and I've had bad, and I know many police officers, both white and black, as a people, so there are a lot of great police officers out there, both sides, but I have had bad cops. I have seen a racist cop. One time we were stopped, I would have been maybe around 25, we had one baby driving a kid, again, from Kansas City, remember? You're dropping your friend.
No offense, Kansas City.
Sorry, Casey, we love you. We love the football team.
No, we were on the highway coming home.
Yeah, I-29, and the guy stopped me, and he was a bad cop, and probably a racist cop. And I know I was profiled.
I was in the back, tinted windows with the baby.
Yep, tinted window with the baby. The guy came on and stopped me, and I know I was profiled because he saw I was a black guy. And it looked like I was alone.
We were driving a minivan.
I was driving a minivan. I was probably 25 years old. And people used to tease us of the minivan. How many kids do you want to have?
We had great vision.
Who buys a minivan with one kid, So, well, they just didn't know us then. Well. But anyway, the guy stopped me, and it was a silly experience. He actually made me come out of the car. I did.
Yeah,
and,
he told him he was speeding. Solo knew he wasn't.
I know he wasn't.
Couldn't tell him what his speed was.
So I asked the guy, hey, so what did you clock me at? He goes, well, I didn't clock it. Anytime you're passing people very easily like that, that's just a gauge to know that you're going fast. I said, I wasn't going fast. Yeah. They could be going 20 below speed limit. I said, if you could show me.
I've sped before, and
I told the guy, if you show me the speed, maybe I have a problem with my odometer. I'm not going to say that, but I know I wasn't speeding. And he got me in his car, and we talked. And I did, even in that experience, I did not feel fearful. But I think some of it is because that's just a predetermined mental state, which I'm not.
When he saw me, too, remember, he changed his tune totally.
Oh, that's true. He did. Yeah.
That's why we.
So I don't know where that conversation would have gone. But I say, hey, I just saw my wife and my baby are in the car. We just dropped someone from the airport going back home. And they said, so, well, I'm just going to give you a verbal warning. And then he so, and I'm not saying that it's invalid for people to fear, but I think I was never brought up to fear police. My dad was in the military, so maybe that is one of the reasons. But I also would just speak to them respectfully the way I would speak to anybody else.
So what are you teaching your sons?
I'm teaching them to be respectful, each one. Well, is respect the law. Don't get quickly upset with people, If you feel like you've been treated unfairly, number one, their problem is the person, not you. And so because sometimes someone innocent, someone that's innocent, if they are dealing with fear, they might act irrationally in a way that they wouldn't have acted if they were just feeling cool all by themselves. And it could lead to an escalation of a situation that shouldn't be escalated. Now, that said, I know that there's been situations where just horrible police officers or anybody sometimes the escalation is by the police officer. I mean, you look at George Floyd's video. Yeah. I mean, our eyes don't lie to us. You can say all sorts of things. You can say he was high. You can say what? Our eyes, it doesn't lie to us. And so those types of things can happen. It can happen to anyone. So I like to think of it that way. It's not that I'm putting racism down as it's not there, but if I think of it that way, I think it helps me to be in the correct state of mind and in the correct emotional state. Yes. So that I'm making sober decision that sometimes if I have to report somebody or sue a police department, I do that. If I'm dead, I can't do that. And so I want to just make sure that because that could happen I've had stories like that done to also white people. So it does happen, but obviously with the historical events in this country, it's happened by disproportionately in terms of the percentage of population to black people than it's just take one accusation oftentimes to convict a black man.
Let's talk about a way forward.
I think it's important to think of it from the whole human being. Like we are spirit, soul, and body. And racism affects every one of those areas in people's lives. And so certain decisions that we make, that we want to do as a society will impact the different elements. Yeah, spirit, soul, and body. Laws that get changed will impact the body. You know, things like it's definitive. This is wrong. Don't do this. This is the law. That's the abolition of slavery.
Yeah. Right.
That took care of the body element. But racism was like 10 times worse almost.
Didn't solve it.
It didn't solve it. Until the civil rights movement came, you know, the Jim Crow and all that, it was institutionalized racism, even though the slavery was abolished, you know. And so...
And the soul level.
The soul, that comes with experience, exposure, education, learning, empathy. And so those types of things impacts the soul level. Your inner lecture says, man, guys, this makes no sense. This is wrong. And people kind of listen and we can coexist at that level.
Can people still have racism with that?
Absolutely. Because people can still say the right things. They can still behave correctly.
Know all the right things.
Know all the right things. And even tell themselves psychologically that they're not racist.
Yeah.
But they have an issue of the heart.
Yeah.
They have prejudices that are in there that
they come out when you're the waiter handing the bill to them.
Yep, they come out in weird ways, in very subtle ways, but they're there. Yeah. Or they come up when your kid wants to marry a person from the other race. They come out in those types of things in the family, or you have to, you know. So that's the thing that I think. Well, at the core, that's spiritual. Really, the root is sin, and the remedy is love. Because we can live in tolerance, and that can be okay, but love is a lot stronger because it changes from the inside out. It's relational.
So that's the spiritual level.
That's the spiritual level. And that's why I do believe when we apply proper context, theology, when it's messed up, it messes up everyone. But if we put theology in the right place, I was asked this question by someone, we're talking about this whole thing within a marriage, and they threw in a scripture that was kind of put out of context. Yeah, right. But then there was a follow-up question from another person, and they asked, when you do the interracial marriage, didn't God create all the diversity? And so when you're intermarried, does it interfere with the diversity that God had created?
Oh.
See?
Yeah.
So they had been taught that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, God created all these types of people.
So we're messing up His creation.
So we're messing up His beautiful creation. You see? So that's a twisted way of looking at scripture.
Yeah.
And I said, that's a lie. Actually, there's no scripture and verse that says God created all these different races. In fact, God did not create a bunch of races. God created one man and one woman. And all humanity comes from one race. We don't even know what they look like. We don't even know Adam and Eve were black, white, or somewhere in between. But all is but they're progenitors of mankind. And that's why we are human race. And so He created one race, and in that race there is diversity that comes. Our kids look at each other like each other, but I think two, three different generations, different kids are going to look differently depending on who they marry and all that. And that's happened, tracing back to the progenitors of mankind, Adam and Eve, you know. So He didn't create like white guys and blue guys and green guys and black guys. No, He created one father, one mother, and He says, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. And so that's all the races of the earth came. For those who are interested in Bible study, Genesis 11 shows us how the diversity happened in terms of nationalities and how people spread out and languages came about. And so you can trace it back to the scripture and see how everybody started spreading out. You can see Africans in the Bible times, they did not talk about race like the way we talk about it. Yeah. Not at all. But yet you see records of people way back in the New Testament, in the Old Testament and New Testament. There are people from Africa, Europe, Asia, Middle East, all living with each other. Like King David gets a visit from the Queen of Ethiopia. You read about the Cushites back in Genesis. Those are Sudanese people, you know, but they never talked about the color of their skin. They talked about their nationality, but not their pigmentation. So people can distort the word of God to make it fit what they already have premeditated there once, or what they wanted to say.
What are you telling your children and teaching them?
First of all, I want to teach them to be people of integrity. Have integrity and have strong self-esteem. The image of themselves, how they see themselves, not be defined by what others think of them. So inside, know who they are, know their strength. Be respectful of other people. the ones that they agree with and the ones that they disagree. To be strong, but know how to use their strength wisely. Know when to fight and when to yield strength, or when to use their strength to help others. So that was a kind of general principle.
I think too, if you have an all-white family, it's really important to have diversity in your life and in your home. The way I grew up, I think that makes a huge difference for my brother and I as kids growing up like that. If you have an all-black family, same thing. Whatever nationality, whatever color,
Asian,
whatever culture.
Hispanic.
And by the way, there are so many cultures within each of those color groups that we're mentioning. And it's so important to just know other cultures.
Diversify yourself.
Yes.
Diversify your friendships and associations. It will change your life.
There are people living in your city that are different than you.
You might discover some really good food too in different cultures. So that's a foodie here. It's like, love some other cultures. You might like, you know.
You might really love
love their cultures, you know. Because there's some good food all over the world.
That's right. Good. Well, thanks for the conversation.
Yes, guys. Be good out there. Be patient with people. Forgive easily. And we should be honest with ourselves here in the United States. It's a year of election.
Yeah.
Usually emotions are also higher. Yeah. But you can just choose to be yourself and be kind and be gracious. Be patient. Even with people that see it differently than you do.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear your own stories. If you have a different perspective than us, we'd love to hear it in respectful ways in the comments below.
Yeah, let's be respectful, good people. Let's be respectful in the forum, you know.
It's okay to disagree respectfully.
Absolutely.
I watch people I disagree with all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
No, it's good actually to hear from other people.
It's good for us. That's how we grow. That's how we grow.
That's right.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching today. And we will see you next time.
Have a good one.